unsealed archives. The red lamp came on above the microphone. June the 28th, 2001. Eagar, Arizona. William Cooper sat at the console with the television report beside him and a shortwave transmitter warming the room. A camera crew had found Osama bin Laden. They had entered his hiding place, interviewed him and his senior men, then returned to announce that an attack on the United States and Israel could come within 3 weeks. Cooper stopped there. The largest intelligence service ever assembled had searched for bin Laden for years. Its satellites could read a vehicle plate. Its listening stations reached through walls. Its budget vanished into numbers the public never saw. Yet a reporter had walked into the wanted man's camp with lights, batteries, microphones, and a crew. Cooper leaned toward the mic. "Don't you think that's kind of strange, folks?" He read the report again. Access, interview, warning. Blame already prepared. Then he put his own warning on the air. Be prepared for a major attack. But it won't be Osama bin Laden. It will be those behind the New World Order. He gave no target. He allowed that the attack might come later than the report claimed. The message stayed hard at the center. Something terrible would be used to regain public sympathy, disarm resistance, and take freedoms the government had failed to take by ordinary means. His voice crossed the desert to the relay station in Tennessee. From there it climbed into the night and returned hundreds of miles away in truck cabs, guard shacks, and prison radios. Men recorded the show onto cassettes. Cooper kept talking until the music came up under him. He switched off the microphone. The recording kept its date. The projector stopped in the middle of the film. The house lights came up inside the base theater in the Azores. An officer walked in front of the frozen picture and asked the men in the seats to report for blood donation. A B-29 had crashed near the runway. There were burns. They needed every type. 9-year-old Bill Cooper followed the adults outside. The bomber lay open beyond the fence. Fuel burned across the metal. Men came out of the wreck with fire on their clothes and ran until the ground took them. Cooper wrote one line about it years later. "I saw men on fire running through the night." His father, Milton Vance Cooper, had flown before the Air Force became its own branch. Everybody called him Jack. He carried the service home in his posture, his shoes and the belt that hung behind the kitchen door. Orders into discussion. The family crossed oceans under orders. Oklahoma, Hawaii, the Azores, England, Japan. Crates open. Quarters changed. The belt found the same hook. Bill learned aircraft names, insignia, and the sounds engines made when something inside them was wrong. He learned to enter a new school without waiting to be welcomed. He learned where the radio station was on every base. At an Air Force base near Tokyo, Armed Forces Radio needed a teenage host. Cooper was 16. He put on the headphones, tested the fader, and watched the needle rise against his voice. "This is the Mad Lad." His theme was Quiet Village. He ran a program called Radio Teen. The booth held 2 turntables, a microphone, a clock, and the telephone layer. He marked the opening groove with a grease pencil. He cued the next record under one ear while the first played through the other. When a song ran 3 minutes and 8 seconds, his station break landed at 3 minutes and 7. The boy who changed countries every few years could sit in one room and reach all of Japan. Letters came from bases he had never seen. Requests came in from bases across Japan and housing blocks outside Tokyo. Teenagers turned the same dial, heard the same opening drums, and moved the furniture back from the wall. Cooper later wrote that hundreds of them danced to music spun on his little machines. Jack stood once behind the control room glass, flight jacket zipped, cap under his arm. Bill lifted one finger without looking away from the clock. The record ended. He opened the microphone on time. "Good evening, Japan." Jack gave him one nod and left. At home, Jack put his wristwatch beside an old record and pointed to the second hand. Bill set the needle above the opening groove. He missed the first note. Jack returned the arm to its rest. Bill backspun the disc, found the edge of the sound, and marked the label with a pencil. On the fourth try, the first note landed when the hand crossed 12. Jack took back his watch and went to bed. The platter turned under the needle. The Air Force put Cooper beside the machines built to end cities. Strategic Air Command, B-52 bombers, KC-135 tankers, Minuteman missiles. He held a secret clearance before he could buy a drink. Checklists governed the work. A missed line could keep an aircraft on the ground or send it into the sky wrong. He left with an honorable discharge and enlisted in the Navy. Motion sickness followed him aboard. He stayed. Vietnam put him on patrol craft where the water narrowed and the banks came close. The men watched the tree line. Cooper watched the water, the bank, the wake in the hands of every man in the boat. He made quartermaster first class E6 in 8 years. The Navy gave him combat decorations. The citations carried the letter V. On a Pacific deployment, he stood port lookout after dark. The submarine had surfaced. His binoculars hung against his chest. A light appeared below the water off the bow. It rose. Cooper called the bearing. Another man came up. Then the chief with a camera. The captain joined them on deck. A metallic object cleared the surface, turned above the water, and hung there while the men watched. The chief raised the camera. Water ran from the object. It descended, and the ocean closed over it. The men signed the log. Years later, Cooper described the first thing he had done after calling the sighting. "I made sure somebody else saw it. My daddy didn't raise no fools." The Navy moved him from exposed decks into briefing rooms. At the fleet headquarters above Pearl Harbor, he served on the intelligence briefing team for the Commander-in-Chief, Pacific Fleet. His work put classified material in his hands and admirals at the other side of the table. He retrieved folders, checked pages, prepared charts, and returned the packages to the safe. One folder carried names he would repeat for the rest of his life. Grudge majority. A secret government operating behind the elected one. Recovered machines. Biological occupants. Agreements made without Congress. The construction of underground sites. The use of narcotics and black budgets to finance work the public could never be allowed to see. The folder described a permanent authority above presidents. Military intelligence, private banking families, policy societies, and men whose names never appeared on a ballot moved through the same committees. Elected administrations changed. The programs continued. A president could receive part of the briefing and still remain outside the governing circle. Cooper read a section on Kennedy. The president had become a security risk. He had threatened the intelligence services, the drug traffic, and the secrecy surrounding the machines. The men responsible for continuity removed the risk. The assassination in Dallas was presented as internal action, then buried beneath an inquiry built to exhaust the public. Another section described control through managed conflict. Finance both sides. Direct the reaction. Offer a central authority as the only protection from the crisis. War created debt, new agencies and borders that outlived the dead. Terror at home could perform the same work faster. Population control appeared beside gun confiscation and psychological operations. Public schools trained compliance. Entertainment occupied the hours left after work. News ownership narrowed the field of permitted thought. The result required no soldier at every door. People carried the limits inside themselves and punished the neighbor who crossed them. The alien material sat inside that architecture. It was the largest enemy in the folder, an enemy with no capital to bomb and no population with whom the public could make peace. Under a threat from outside Earth, every human government could be ordered under one command. He read the pages twice. The stamps were right. The routing marks were right. The folder had come from the same safe as fleet movements and weapons assessments that men would act on before dawn. A clerk could question the contents or preserve his clearance. He could not do both in that room. Cooper put the pages back in order. He closed the cover and carried the folder to the briefing table. He returned the folder. His signature entered the log beneath the date. The woman waited until the questions were nearly over. Los Angeles, 1988. Cooper stood at the front of a lecture hall with an empty pant leg and a stack of documents. He had spent hours describing the government behind the government, the classified programs, the narcotics money, the plan to use fear as a lever against the American public. His delivery stayed flat. Dates, names, offices. The audience supplied the heat. The woman rose near the back. Why haven't you been assassinated? Cooper looked across the room. If they killed me right now, what would you think? That it's true. As long as they don't touch me, some of you will keep wondering. I've got them right where I want them. The room broke into applause. Cooper lifted his hand and stopped it. He pointed to the papers on the table. Check this. Don't clap for me. He spent the next years turning the classified picture into a public file. Congressional records, executive orders, intelligence charters, banking documents, technical studies, old speeches pulled from library stacks. He bound them with his own testimony and published Behold a Pale Horse in 1991. The book escaped its category. copies moved through gun shows and military barracks, then through barbershops, recording studios, and cell blocks. Rappers named it in songs. Prisoners copied pages by hand. Readers argued over the alien documents and kept the chapters on covert government, population control, weapons law, and the coming police state. At the front of the book, Cooper placed a document titled Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. It described social control in the language of engineering. A population became an input. Wages, prices, debt, education, and entertainment became pressures. The operator measured behavior, changed one condition, and watched the response. The ideal weapon produced obedience without giving the subject a visible attacker. The chapter supplied a vocabulary for things readers had lived without being able to connect. A factory closed after receiving public money. A bank created debt and called the interest wealth. A school rewarded the correct answer after punishing the dangerous question. A television network turned a federal raid into evening entertainment. Cooper put the pieces on one table and drew the lines between them. He told readers the system worked through consent as often as force. A person accepted the loan, repeated the headline, surrendered the weapon, chose between candidates approved by the same money, and called the result freedom. Institutions profiting from the same direction tightened the chain without waiting for one master in one room. The machinery was already visible in a prison commissary, a mortgage statement, and a city council meeting. Cooper had given it names. Cooper built a radio room in the Arizona high country and called the program The Hour of the Time. Shortwave carried the show to a relay in Nashville, then over the curve of the earth. He opened with a burst of orchestral thunder, identified himself as William Cooper, and went to work. At the program's height, roughly 100,000 people listened. The number mattered once. What they heard mattered every night. The title of the paper, the date on it, the office that issued it, and the question that could make the whole claim fall apart. Some nights he read a single government paper for the entire hour. He gave the title, date, issuing office, and the library where a listener could find it. Other nights he took calls and cross-examined the claim before he allowed the fear. He read corrections through the same microphone he used for accusations. A paper without a source went face down on the desk. A caller who could not explain the mechanism stayed on the line until the missing step showed. Listeners learned the difference between being frightened and having a case. One caller said federal agents had tapped a computer keyboard. "What exactly are you talking about?" Cooper said. The caller named Tempest Surveillance, then mixed the radiation from a monitor with a physical tap on the keys. Cooper separated them. Distance, equipment, entry into the house, warrant. The caller tried to move ahead. Cooper pulled him back until the mechanism could be seen. The show gained authority each time he refused a story his own listeners wanted to believe. A fax arrived from the Republic of Texas announcing a federal hit order against its president. The page claimed high-level government sources and a coming operation named Crash and Burn. It was built from phrases that traveled well across Patriot networks. Cooper read the first section on air. Then he reached the president's martial law order. Didn't anybody tell him that if he's a dictator, he doesn't need a grand jury? He kept reading. The claims got larger. Cooper laughed into the microphone. I got a call. Whoopi Goldberg. The men behind the facts called themselves patriots. That bought them nothing. Cooper checked the names, the offices, and the asserted powers. The paper failed. You don't have to lie about things, he told the audience. You don't have to sensationalize them. The truth is bad enough. His rule went against the business model forming around him. Panic held listeners. Rumor filled airtime. A broadcaster could give frightened people a new enemy every night and sell them protection during the break. Cooper sold gold on his show. He also told the customer when the salesman was lying. If you tell the truth, you have credibility, and credibility means people will listen to you. He gave no faction custody of his mind. He attacked presidents, agencies, malicious celebrities, UFO researchers, secret societies, and his own callers. The audience returned because the blows landed in every direction. He had served the state, read its paper, watched its wars, and learned its vocabulary. He could take a government sentence apart from the inside. The facts stayed on his desk after the show. Across the margins, Cooper had written names, telephone numbers, and 3 words in block capitals. Check it again. The ATF agent saw Cooper's camera and moved his hand toward the holster. Cooper had come to Waco with Annie. They stood outside the cordon among vehicles, federal men and the reporters, carrying the approved picture back to the country. Cooper raised the camera and photographed the agents. One of them crossed the road. Give me the camera. Cooper kept it at his eye. The agent opened the retention strap on his sidearm. Annie stood beside Cooper with her hand inside her purse, fingers around a revolver. The 3 hands held. The agent went back across the road. Cooper had waited for facts before taking a position on the siege. Once he had them, his position left no air between the words. The Branch Davidians possessed a federal firearms license. Their weapons were legal. David Koresh traveled into town. Agents could have served a warrant away from the women and children. An undercover agent inside Mount Carmel warned his superiors that supplies had been lost. The raid continued for the cameras. Cooper told his listeners what would happen. If Americans do not get to Waco and stand between the federal agents and the people in that church, they're all going to be murdered. Nobody formed the line. On April 19th, armored vehicles tore holes through Mount Carmel and pumped CS gas into the building. The gas entered rooms holding children. The tanks crushed walls and exits. Hours of pressure ended in fire. The country watched the compound burn through a long television lens while agents kept fire engines at the checkpoint. 3 fires appeared across the structure. The federal command had no working fire plan beyond holding the equipment away. Wind pushed flame through the holes made by the tanks. People who reached windows encountered gas, broken walls, and gunfire outside. 76 Davidians died, including children. The official operation had prepared cameras before it prepared water. A TF personnel alerted the press to the first raid. Agents made their own video from inside the planning and staging areas. When the raid failed, the recording that could show orders, weapons, and timing disappeared. Afterward, the government removed the remains, leveled the site, and returned a story with the evidence missing from it. Cooper kept Waco on the air for years. He ran the tapes on the hour of the time, rules of engagement. Then Waco, a new revelation. The video played on a monitor beside the console. He worked the remote with one hand and marked times with the other. The first raid videotape had disappeared. Surveillance log pages were gone. The right front door, the door that could show which direction the first bullets traveled, did not survive the crime scene. Government home movies showed Davidians at work, eating meals and caring for children. Officials kept those images from the public because a family on a videotape would break the word cult. Cooper rewound the tank footage. The barrel entered the wall. The building opened around it. He moved to the infrared recording from the surveillance aircraft. White pulses appeared behind the building. Investigators in the film identified them as automatic gunfire directed toward an exit. The government called them reflections. Cooper froze the frame, advanced it, froze it again. The documentary put pyrotechnic tear gas devices into the federal inventory. Radio traffic placed fire engines away from the scene. A commander said on camera that he held the trucks because of possible gunfire. He said the decision took 2 seconds. Cooper let the tape run past the statement. No fire engine appeared. He returned to the missing door. Every object that could speak for the dead had passed through the hands of the men accused by that object. The raid tape, the logs, the door, the site itself. Cooper lined them up on the broadcast and named the custody chain. The Branch Davidians were murdered, ladies and gentlemen. Pure and simple. Years later, when other broadcasters used Waco as atmosphere, Cooper kept reading the evidence. He separated what the camera caught from what officials said over it. He gave the dead their names. He gave the missing things their shapes. The agent's hand had gone to the holster. Annie's hand had stayed inside the purse. Cooper kept the camera. Everything I've been warning you about is coming true, Cooper said. And I hate it. The Murrah building had been open for the workday when the blast took its north face away. Children were inside. Bodies lay under concrete while television anchors named suspects, enemies, and motives before the smoke cleared. Cooper sat at the microphone with notes spread across the desk. I have this overwhelming sense that I failed. He left the sentence there. Then he went to work. Early reporting pushed suspicion toward Muslims. When Christian and Jewish clergy were invited to the public memorial, an Islamic minister was left out. Cooper read the account on air and drove the point into due process. The men first blamed had been judged before evidence. Then their neighbors had been excluded from grief. 2 suspects were arrested. Cooper called them men who were no patriots. New information came in. Military service, desert storm, no verdict. He returned the next night. Under the concept that you are innocent till proven guilty. I apologize. I should not have made that statement. Television offered two positions: accept the government story or defend mass murder. Cooper condemned the bombing and kept the investigation open. We all despise that bombing. Then he said who had done it. It was the government intelligence community. There isn't any doubt about it. The first World Trade Center bombing had placed FBI informant Emad Salem inside the plot. Salem recorded his handlers. He warned them. He asked to substitute harmless material for the explosives. The bomb remained live. After Oklahoma City, blame moved toward militias and constitutionalists, while security legislation already prepared in Washington came forward. Cooper played a 60 Minutes exchange. Mike Wallace asked the president whether Americans would have to surrender liberties to combat domestic and foreign terrorism. The president denied the trade, then asked Congress for new anti-terror powers and changes touching habeas corpus. Cooper stopped the tape. Habeas corpus kept the state from taking a person into a cell and erasing the reason. The protection had survived wars and riots. Now dead children were being used to make it sound indulgent. Cooper pressed play. Waco entered the interview. The president said federal officers had been murdered before the raid, and the Davidians had killed their own children. Cooper came over the recording before the sentence finished. He read the February 28th sequence again. Federal teams arrived for the raid. Gunfire began. Koresh opened the door with his hands visible and called out that women and children were inside. The agent shot him. The surviving door disappeared. Whoever fires the first shot wins, Cooper said. That's what they believe. We believe whoever fires the first shot loses. He refused retaliation. A patriot who fired on an agent would give the state the picture it needed. A dead child in Oklahoma City could be placed over Waco until any question about Waco looked like approval of Oklahoma City. Cooper called the move before the language settled into law. Then he made his answer physical. He opened a reward fund for the arrest and conviction of the Oklahoma City bombers and the people responsible for the deaths at Waco. The money would sit in an audited account. He asked listeners to collect evidence, find witnesses, and force someone with knowledge to speak. He read the mailing address twice. Reward Fund for Oklahoma City and Waco. Post Office Box 3390, St. John's, Arizona 85936. The address remained under the microphone while the music rose. Cooper gave the rule before he used it on himself. Sometimes we believe we're broadcasting the truth, and it turns out we really aren't. He sat behind the same microphone that had carried the aliens, the treaty, and the recovered bodies into homes across the country. The early lectures had made his name. Behold, a pale horse carried the material on its cover and through its opening chapters. Men had built entire belief systems from pages he had first read in a secure room above Pearl Harbor. Cooper placed those pages under his own standard. If we find out we aren't, We must be willing and instantly able to go on the air and say we were wrong and correct it. His hand stayed near the microphone switch. I've had to do it several times. Then he cut the central wire in his legend. There is not one shred of evidence anywhere that extraterrestrials existed or had visited Earth. The craft were real. The technology was real. Human beings had built and flown machines beyond the public inventory. The bodies, treaties, and visitors from another planet had failed the test Cooper demanded from everyone else. He called that story bullshit. He called it a lie. The public argument offered two positions. Visitors from space controlled the government, or every witness to a strange machine had imagined it. Cooper found the third. The machines existed. The men flying them wanted witnesses to call them extraterrestrial. That position preserved the sightings and changed the owner. Black programs could cross the sky with technology developed outside public budgets. A witness would describe the machine accurately and explain it incorrectly. The false explanation protected the true program better than silence. Anyone investigating the hardware would be pulled toward visitors, abductions, and treaties until the engineering disappeared behind the spectacle. I did not believe that the government would use me in that way. I had devoted my whole life to government service. Air Force, Navy, Vietnam, combat ribbons, Pacific Fleet. The stamp carried his father's uniform, the SAC checklist, and the admiral waiting at the briefing table. The chain of command had trained him to treat the safe as the clean end of the process. Maybe that's why it was so easy to use me. He stopped speaking. The room held the transmitter fan. Cooper had spent years searching for proof of visitors. Instead, he found a plan for a visitor who never had to arrive. One of the papers came from a 1917 dinner honoring a Japanese delegation. John Dewey described an attack by another species as the fastest path toward a government of the world. Cooper found the same mechanism in later studies of a substitute for war. A permanent external enemy could bind rival nations, justify emergency powers, and direct whole populations toward one command. He played speeches from President Reagan. The president asked the United Nations to consider how quickly human differences would vanish under an alien threat from outside the world. The line appeared again in a speech to students and again before international leaders. Cooper counted 8 uses. He placed each transcript beside the old file from his memory. Seed the research community with official-looking documents. Display machines the public cannot identify. Feed witnesses enough fact to carry the story. Ridicule them through the forgery when the moment is right. Preserve the threat for the day a frightened world needs an enemy larger than any nation. The operation also created its own opposition. Researchers fought over photographs, autopsies, and star systems, while the permanent government expanded in public. Each side called the other blind. Neither side followed the appropriations, the private foundations, the intelligence cutouts, or the transfer of national authority. Cooper turned the broadcast away from the sky and toward the men at the table. He named the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and the Bilderberg meetings. He tracked officials who moved from private policy groups into cabinet offices, banks, universities, networks, and intelligence work. Their public parties changed. Their institutional direction did not. Trade agreements moved power away from voters. Central banking moved control of money away from Congress. International bodies claimed jurisdiction through treaties few citizens had read. The New World Order came without a flag. It arrived through documents. The method had already run on Earth. At Waco, the word cult cleared a path for tanks. After Oklahoma City, the word militia cleared a path toward new police powers. After the first bombing in New York, the word Muslim moved ahead of the evidence. The chosen enemy changed. The transfer of power stayed. Cooper called the destination the New World Order. He barred race and public religion from the accusation. It's not the Jews, it's not the Catholics, it's not the blacks. The men he described belonged to different nations and worshipped in different buildings before the public. They met through banks, policy groups, intelligence services, private orders, and foundations. At the highest level, Cooper said, they all belonged to the same club. Their product was transferred sovereignty. A nation surrendered control over money, war, law, or borders to a body its people could not remove. Crisis supplied the pressure. Media supplied the picture. Politicians presented the transfer as rescue. Cooper laid the sequence out through events. A problem enters the public mind. Fear produces a demand. The same authorities who failed to prevent the problem arrive with the prepared solution. The solution keeps the new power after the fear recedes. He had watched it at Waco. Federal violence produced armed anger. Armed anger justified federal growth. He watched it after Oklahoma City. A bomb against a government building became an argument against habeas corpus and the people who questioned federal power. The first World Trade Center attack brought an informant, foreknowledge and explosives into one operation, then returned as a reason for broader surveillance. Compartmentalization kept most agency workers inside one task. A camera operator carried the picture. A prosecutor protected the case. An editor selected the clip. A legislator voted on the bill placed in front of him. Each man completed his part. The result moved in one direction. Cooper tracked ownership through corporations until the same directors appeared. A newspaper changed hands. A network changed its logo. The permitted argument remained narrow enough to keep the architecture outside the frame. He found another instrument in the Book of Revelation. Read it, he said. The men who are bringing this about are using it as their script. He gave two possibilities. Powerful men were staging the prophecies to immobilize believers who had been taught the events must occur. Or the prophecies were occurring through the men who believed they controlled the performance. Either reading demanded action from the person watching. Prophecy could not become an excuse to kneel before the machinery fulfilling it. The state could plant a lie inside a true witness and wait. The witness would spread the lie farther than an agent ever could. When the lie broke, the public would throw out every fact beside it. The operation used the truth-teller's credibility as both vehicle and fuse. Cooper named the lie on air. He told the audience to reject authority, including his. Don't believe anybody. Don't believe me. Don't believe George Bush. Don't believe anyone. He held up the papers. Get proof in your hand. The stamp established access and custody. It guaranteed nothing else. The listener had to touch the source, trace the owner, read the law, and compare the event to the power harvested afterward. Everything needed for that work sat in public libraries, he said. The statutes, speeches, committee memberships, corporate filings, and policy papers were available. Secrecy hid particular operations. The architecture had been published by its builders because most people would never place the documents beside one another. Cooper did that for them, then ordered them to repeat the work without him. He moved the alien page to the edge of the desk. The public record remained under the lamp. The file on Cooper reached beyond the radio room. Federal investigators monitored his broadcasts. Agents interviewed people around him. Men presented themselves as journalists and asked questions that had little to do with an article. Aircraft passed over the house on the hill and returned along the same line. Photographs of the property entered government files. The charges gave the watching a handle. Taxes, a loan application. Warrants followed. The Marshal's Service placed him among its major fugitives while he continued to broadcast from the same house and use the same telephone number. The government could hear him every night. His mailing address ran on the program. Listeners visited the property. Cooper was a fugitive who announced his location through a transmitter powerful enough to cross state lines. The file grew because the audience mattered. After Oklahoma City, federal investigators mapped militia networks, patriot groups, and the broadcasters those men heard. Cooper's name sat where Waco weapons law, the Constitution, and federal responsibility met. His correction of the alien story made him harder to contain inside the old ridicule. He had turned toward the same public records agents used to justify their power. The warrants solved that problem. The tax count needed no hearing on Waco. A loan count required no disclosure of an intelligence file. The arrest could remain small enough for a courtroom and large enough to take the broadcaster off the air. Cooper published the warrants and called them unlawful. He told the audience an attempt to take him would meet armed resistance. He also described the pressure applied to his family. A warrant reached toward Annie. Cooper sent his wife and children out of the country before the government could use them against him. "They are safe," he said on air. He stayed at the transmitter. The surveillance settled into patterns. A sedan appeared near the road on broadcast nights. A face returned behind a different windshield. A man at the post office watched the wrong window. Cooper wrote the plate, time and direction into a notebook. One morning, 2 of the men left the area below his property and drove into town. Cooper followed at a distance. They parked at a motel, changed vehicles, and went to breakfast. He waited outside long enough for them to order. The restaurant had vinyl booths, a counter, and a front window that reflected the parking lot. Cooper entered, took the booth behind them, and set his hat on the seat. He faced away. The waitress brought coffee. The men talked about the hill, road grade, lines of sight, the vehicle beside the house. Cooper's habit of coming down when strangers made trouble near the property. One man unfolded a small aerial photograph between the plates. Cooper poured cream into his cup and wrote on a napkin beneath the table. Rental plate, motel room, 2 surnames, a phrase about the road. The men had studied his routines. They knew the radio schedule and the rooms inside the house. They had measured the man, too. Cooper confronted the thing that came onto his ground. He went toward the disturbance and forced it to identify itself. He finished the coffee, paid cash, and left before the men turned around. On the next broadcast, he described following the watchers to breakfast. He gave no address. He described the distance between their plates, the folded photograph, and his coffee cup. The next morning, the sedan returned to the road below his property. Cooper wrote the plate beneath the names from the napkin. The date on Cooper's June recording became evidence on September 11th. 2 aircraft entered the towers. Another struck the Pentagon. A 4th came down in Pennsylvania. Before noon, the name Osama bin Laden moved across every network. 75 days earlier, Cooper had put the name and the coming blame on tape. The warning spread through recordings and copied audio files. People who had dismissed the shortwave host heard him describe the structure in advance. Major attack. Designated enemy. Powers waiting behind the fear. The government moved fast. War plans, emergency measures, a new domestic security architecture. The attack became the lever Cooper had spent years describing. Cooper told listeners to watch the countries selected for war and the laws carried through Congress under emergency language. He expected 2 or 3 invasions. He expected domestic power to expand under the word security. The public had been struck once. The response would continue for years. He returned to the June tape because its date made it useful. A prediction could be sharpened after an event. A recording made before the event had edges. His warning named the blamed man, the major attack, and the political structure waiting behind it. It gave the operation away without needing to name a building. The alternative airwaves filled with claims faster than anyone could test them. Faxes named agents, weapons, and secret orders. Websites posted government documents with no chain of custody. Broadcasters competed to be first with the largest version. Alex Jones already had more stations than the one where Cooper first met him. He had studied Cooper's format. Long monologues, government documents, New World Order calls, gold during the break. Now, Cooper had appeared on his program once and treated him well. Jones later told listeners he had cut Cooper off for foul language. Jones kept calling after that first appearance. Cooper refused. Another appearance would carry credibility the younger host had never built through correction. Repeated subjects and borrowed heat could not supply a chain of custody. On September 26, Cooper opened episode 1918 of The Hour of the Time and named the man who was moving into the chair. Alex Jones you are a bold-faced, miserable, stinking little coward liar. He did not build the case on style. He played the record. On New Year's Eve, 1999, Jones had told listeners that Russia launched intercontinental ballistic missiles at the United States. Families loaded cars and fled. Midnight passed. The missiles never came. Cooper had checked the foreign systems Jones claimed were failing. Banks open, utilities ran. The catastrophe existed inside the broadcast. Cooper had warned for years that a sensational falsehood would contaminate every fact beside it. Jones turned that contamination into velocity. The distinction reached beyond a feud. Cooper would hold a claim until the paper arrived. Jones could broadcast the claim, make the fear immediate, and move to the next one before the first collapsed. The audience stayed aroused. The false report became part of the show rather than a wound to the host's authority. That format was easier to syndicate. It was louder, faster, and safer for the system it claimed to fight. A false alarm trained the public to treat every later warning as performance. A real document placed beside 5 rumors became a 6th rumor. The lies and the deceit and the rumors that he spreads over the airwaves are not good for any of us. The telephone line lit. A caller mentioned Project Megiddo, an FBI document said to identify extremists and potential domestic terrorists. "How do you know?" Cooper asked. "I read it on the net." Cooper stopped him. If the FBI had produced the report, the caller could request a copy through the Freedom of Information Act. He could obtain the agency's paper and hold it. Then you've got an official copy in your hand. Otherwise, you don't know. The caller tried to continue from the online version. Cooper refused the premise. The internet carried fabrications, altered documents, and truth mixed with falsehood. A seal at the top of a scanned page proved nothing. The old classified folder and the caller's scanned page met under the same rule. Cooper had been fooled by paper from a government safe. The caller would have to get the issuing agency's copy. The call ended. Another came in. Then another. Cooper tested each claim against source, mechanism, and authority. He rejected demons. He rejected conjecture about nuclear plans. He corrected a caller's history and demanded that words mean the same thing from one sentence to the next. "I may make some mistakes, folks," he said, "but I don't do what these other clowns do." Jones had learned how to hold the audience. Cooper guarded the condition under which the audience was worth holding. 2 microphone meters moved in separate rooms. In Eagar, Cooper reached for the next page. The news report called him a militia member. It said Apache County deputies had gone to serve an arrest warrant on William Cooper in Eagar, Arizona. It said Cooper shot a deputy in the head and died in the gunfight. The reporter pronounced the town wrong and moved to the next story. Hours before the report, an operations team studied the hill. The road climbed through juniper and ended near Cooper's house. A second vehicle sat beside his regular truck. The front door opened toward a yard with a little cover. The The transmitter's schedule placed Cooper inside. The team could have approached in marked units during daylight. They chose an unmarked pickup after dark. No uniforms, loud stereo, men in the back performing drunk teenagers. Neighbors had complained about trouble on the road before. Cooper had confronted it. The planners had other opportunities. He drove into town. He entered stores. He had sat at breakfast near the men watching him. A warrant could have been served on level ground with uniforms, marked vehicles, and witnesses. The hill offered control. Darkness reduced witnesses. The stereo brought Cooper out on schedule. The disguise denied him the one fact that might have changed his response. Law enforcement was present. A man at the briefing table touched the photograph. "He'll come down." Nobody asked why. The truck took its position below the house on November the 5th, 2001. Music struck the windows. The men shouted over it. Cooper came outside, got into his vehicle, and drove down the road. He stopped near the pickup. The men did not identify themselves as law enforcement. He told them to leave or he would call the police. They challenged him to do it. Cooper turned for home. A deputy came out of the juniper near the road as Cooper's vehicle passed. Another unit moved in. Cooper drove up the bank, tore part of the exhaust loose, and continued toward the house. The operation that had waited for him to leave now closed as he returned. He stopped in front of the property and got out. What happened in the next seconds entered two records. The official account said Cooper fired a .38 backward while running and struck Deputy Robert Marinez in the head. Officers returned fire and killed Cooper. The caretaker walked the ground afterward. He placed the vehicles, the juniper, the bank, and the men. He described Cooper crossing the front yard with his back toward Sheriff Jerry Goldsmith. The official shot required a one-legged man in flight to throw his right arm behind him and hit a deputy he could not see. The return fire entered Cooper from behind. The caretaker repeated the instruction law enforcement men had told him, went out over the operation. Bill will not be allowed back in that house alive. Cooper had built the step where dirt met concrete. The door stood beyond it. Inside waited the microphone, the source files and recordings, already copied far outside Apache County. He cleared the parked truck and crossed the yard. The first shot came from behind him. Cooper kept moving toward the house. They took the house, the console, and the man. They did not take the recordings. Cooper had read nearly 2,000 broadcasts into the shortwave. Men had taped them off the air night after night because he had taught them to trust nothing they could not keep in their own hands. The tapes traveled hand to hand. They reached servers he never saw. They are there now. A stranger who was not born when Cooper was alive can start the June recording and hear the date and hear the warning and hear the instruction he closed with every night. Get proof in your hand. The alien pages were poison, and he had said so himself. The men who fed them to him built them to fail in a laboratory and take his name down when they broke. They did break. They could not take the method. It belonged to no office and sat in no safe. Others built their own rooms and raised their own antennas. Some were frauds and some were careful. The careful ones learned what Cooper learned in a windowless room above Pearl Harbor and paid for in his own yard. The recording kept its date. The signal was still transmitting.